The Arizona desert doesn't just kill you, it negotiates. For Victoria Hayes, the price was set by her father's treachery. Silas Hayes gambled with broken rifles and Apache lives. Now, the bill has come due. Kale, a Chiricahua warrior whose brother paid the ultimate price, is the collector. He doesn't want money. He doesn't want blood. He wants her. Taken as payment, she's thrust into a brutal world she can't understand, carrying the weight of a debt she didn't create, and facing a man whose heart is as hard as the mountains he calls home. The buzzing of the blowflies inside the adobe walls of Hayes's trading post was the only sound that dared defy the oppressive 110-degree heat of the Tucson Basin. Victoria Hayes pressed a damp, gray rag to the back of her neck. The water in the bowl was already lukewarm. She stared at the ledger, her elegant, Boston-educated script a stark contrast to the red ink numbers that swam before her eyes. Insolvent. It was a word she had learned to hate even more than drought or fever. "He's coming, Victoria," her father, Silas Hayes, whispered from the shadows of the storeroom. The room stank of his sweat and the cheap whiskey he used to fuel his cowardice. Victoria didn't look up. "Another creditor, father? Mr. Abernathy can wait. We have nothing left to give him but dust and promises, and he's already oversupplied with both." "Not Abernathy," Silas rasped. He fumbled with the clasp of his watch, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't open it. It's them. The Chiricahua." Victoria's pen froze. Her blood ran cold, a welcome, terrifying relief from the heat. She rose slowly, her calico dress clinging to her. She walked to the warped wooden door and peered through the crack, her breath held tight in her chest. 3 riders. They were not U.S. cavalry from Fort Bowie, nor were they local ranchers. They were Apache, moving with a fluid grace that seemed to mock the stillness of the air. They sat on their ponies as if they were fused to them, their rifles held easily across their laps. The one in the center dismounted. He was not like the caricatures she'd seen in Harper's Weekly. He was tall for an Apache, with a breadth of shoulder that spoke of raw, coiled power. He wore hide leggings and a simple breechclout, his chest bare and scored with old white scars that told stories she could never read. A single eagle feather was tied into his long black hair, but it was his face that held her. It was a map of hard lines, high cheekbones, and a mouth set in an expression of absolute unyielding resolve. His eyes, when he lifted them to the trading post, were as black and deep as a desert well. "Bar the door, Victoria, for God's sake!" Silas shrieked, knocking over a stool in his panic. "And do what, father?" Victoria said, her voice trembling but cold. "Die of thirst while they wait? You invited this, whoever he is." The warrior stopped 10 paces from the porch. He did not knock. He did not call out. He simply stood, a silent, damning judgment on the heat-shimmering air. "I have to." Silas grabbed a bottle from the shelf, his eyes wild. I'll reason with him." "You'll do no such thing," Victoria snapped, pushing past him and stepping out onto the porch. The sun hit her like a physical hammer. "You have done enough reasoning to last us a lifetime." She shaded her eyes, her hand trembling, but she would not let him see. She addressed the warrior. "We have no trade today. We have no goods, no ammunition, and no food to spare. You must move on." The warrior's gaze flicked from her to the trembling figure of her father, who was half hidden in the doorway. He spoke, his voice a low gravel, but his English was clear, learned from years of brutal negotiation. "I am not here for trade, Dotahi," he said, using the Apache word for white woman. I am Kale. I am here for the payment. Payment? Victoria stepped forward, her fear momentarily eclipsed by her anger. We have no money. You can see what this place is. My father has nothing. He has you, Kale stated, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. Victoria laughed, a dry, sharp sound that died instantly in the heat. That is absurd. You can't be serious. You can't own a person. Silas Hayes, Kale said, his voice rising, ignoring Victoria completely, as if she were a buzzing fly. He pointed a long, accusatory finger at her father. You made a bargain with the ND, the people. You sold us rifles. 10 good Winchester rifles, you said. They were, Silas stammered, shrinking. The best. I swear it. They were faulty. Kale's voice dropped to a deadly whisper that carried farther than a shout. The firing pins. You filed them. They broke on the second shot. You sold us poisoned powder that fouled the barrels. And then, you sold our location. Victoria's stomach turned to ice. She spun to face her father. What? What is he talking about? He's a liar. A savage liar, Silas cried. 3 days ago, Kale continued, his voice void of all emotion. Bartholomew Slocum and his miners hit our winter camp. They knew where to look. They knew we were low on meat. They knew our rifles would fail. He paused, and the silence was more terrible than any words. They killed my brother. They killed my chief's son. They killed 8 warriors who died with broken, useless guns in their hands. He took a step closer, and Victoria had to fight the urge to run. The debt, Silas Hayes, is for 10 good rifles. The debt is for the betrayal of my people. The debt is for the life of my brother Taza. Kyle's hand drifted to the long-bladed knife at his hip. I came here to take your life. It is what our law demands. Ishi Dinshtu, the blood price. Silas collapsed, sobbing against the doorframe. Please, no. I have nothing. Take the post, take the land, take everything. Kale looked at the dilapidated building, his lip curling in contempt. Your junk? It is worthless. You are worthless. His eyes moved back to Victoria, assessing her. She stood tall, her spine rigid, though her hands were clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. But you are not. What do you mean? Victoria whispered, the desert floor seeming to fall away from her. A snake like him. He will not feel his own death, Kale mused, speaking to the wind. His life is small, but he will feel the loss of his blood. He will feel the loss of his only payment. He locked his gaze on Silas. I will not kill you today, white man. You will live. You will live here, with your broken bottles and your ghosts. You will live, knowing that what you valued, I have taken. No, Victoria breathed. No, you can't. It's kidnapping. He can. Silas scrambled forward on his knees, not to defend her, but to grab at his daughter's skirt. Victoria, my girl, my sweet Victoria, tell him. Tell him you're no good for him. You can't cook. You can't. I can read, Victoria said, her voice a hollow shell. Kyle actually smiled. It was a terrifying sight. All teeth and no warmth. A useful skill. You will teach it to the children, if you live. He nodded to his 2 companions. They dismounted, their movements swift and silent. No, Victoria screamed, finally pulling away from her father. You can't do this. The army, Fort Bowie will hear of this. The army is Slocum's friend, not mine, Kale said. He grabbed her arm. His grip was not cruel, but it was absolute, like iron forged in a cold fire. You are the debt, Dotahi, and the debt is paid. Silas Hayes did not fight. He did not plead for his daughter's life. He simply watched, his face a mask of pathetic, unmistakable relief, as they tied her hands, lifted her roughly onto a spare pony, and rode east. Victoria did not look back. There was nothing left to see. The journey was a descent into a sun-blasted hell. For 2 days, they rode. Victoria had always considered herself resilient. She had managed her father's failing business, dealt with drunken prospectors, and endured the patronizing pity of the few respectable families in Tucson. She was nothing. The desert, she learned, did not care for a quick wit or a spine of steel. It demanded a different kind of strength, one she did not possess. Her hands, tied to the saddle horn, were raw and bleeding. Her fine calico dress, a symbol of a life that now seemed like a distant dream, was shredded by ocotillo and catclaw. Her lips, which she had once been told were her finest feature, were cracked and bleeding. Kyle was merciless. He set a pace that was just short of a trot, pushing the ponies through dried arroyos and over rocky mesas. He did not speak to her. He did not look at her. He simply existed, a force of nature like the wind or the heat, pulling her deeper into an alien world. On the first night, they made a cold camp in the lee of some boulders. He untied her hands, and she fell from the pony, her legs buckling. He threw a strip of dried, leathery meat at her feet. Jerky. It was tough and tasted of salt and smoke. She was so hungry, she devoured it, weeping silent, angry tears. Water, she croaked, her throat sandpaper. He ignored her, his back to her, as he checked the perimeter of their small camp. His 2 warriors, whose names she did not know, had fanned out, disappearing into the rocks like ghosts. "Please," she begged, hating the sound of her own voice. "I need water." Cale turned. His face in the moonlight was all sharp angles and shadows. He unhooked a small water skin from his belt, took a long, slow drink himself, and then recorked it. He set it down on the ground, a good 10 feet away from her. "If you wish to drink," he said, his voice flat, "you will drink. I will not be your servant." He turned his back on her and rolled himself into a blanket. Victoria stared at the water skin. It was a test, a humiliation. She thought of her father, of his easy comforts and his quick betrayals. She thought of the cool, deep well at the trading post. And then, with a sob of pure rage, she crawled on her hands and knees across the sharp gravel. The small stones cut into her palms. She snatched the water skin, tore the cork with her teeth, and drank, the lukewarm water tasting sweeter than any wine. When she finished, she looked up, panting. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. "Your father, he is a tisika, a snake," Cale said into the darkness. "He trades in lies. He sold us to Slocum for a bag of silver ore. Slocum wants the mountain, our sacred mountain. He thinks it is full of his yellow poison." Victoria wiped her mouth, her defiance returning like a fever. "And you are a thief. You stole me." "I did not steal you," he corrected, his voice dangerously soft. "I collected you. You are in Naintiel. Leverage. A shield. Your father's treachery has brought war to my people. Slocum's men now hunt us, and the Indalki, the Bluecoats, at Fort Bowie do nothing, for Slocum pays them well." "So I am a hostage," Victoria said, the word tasting like ash. "You are Dahzizze," he replied, "a thing that is paid. Your worth is what your father will do to get you back. He will have to return the silver. He will have to give us the rifles he promised, real rifles." He will have to tell the bluecoats at the fort that Slocum, not the Apache, is the one breaking the peace. A cold, hard laugh escaped Victoria's lips, surprising them both. You don't know my father. He won't do any of those things. He doesn't have the silver. He doesn't have the courage. He is glad I am gone. You've taken his burden. Cale was silent for a long time. The only sound was the ch-ch-ch of a night insect. Then you are worthless to me, he said finally. So kill me, Victoria shot back, her voice breaking. Kill me and get it over with. It is better than this. Cale moved so fast she didn't even see him rise. In an instant, he was kneeling in front of her, his presence a physical weight. He grabbed her chin, his grip bruising, forcing her to meet his gaze. His eyes were not cold now. They were burning. Kill you? He hissed. You think death is a gift I give so easily? You think your small white life is yours to throw away? My brother earned his death. He died fighting for his family. Your father lives because he is a coward. You will live to see what he has done. You will live with the women whose husbands you made widows. You will eat the dust and the little food we have, which is little because of him. You will not die. You will endure. That will be your payment. He released her, shoving her back. He turned and was gone, melting into the shadows to take his watch. Victoria was left alone, shaking, not from fear of the warrior, but from the sudden, terrifying realization that he was right. Her father had sacrificed her, and the man who had taken her saw her not as a woman, but as the living, breathing embodiment of a debt that could never, ever be truly repaid. On the third day, the world changed. The flat, baking desert gave way to foothills of manzanita and scrub oak. The air grew thinner, the heat less oppressive. They were climbing. Cale pushed them relentlessly, up switchbacks that were little more than goat paths, into the heart of the jagged, purple-peaked Chiricahua Mountains. Victoria's world had shrunk to the rhythmic plodding of the pony, the ache in her bones, and the silent, imposing back of the man in front of her. Just when she thought her body would fail completely, they rounded a high granite tor and the path opened up. She gasped. Below them, hidden in a deep, lush canyon, was the Apache stronghold. It was not the collection of crude huts she had imagined. It was a true village, a rancheria, nestled by a swift-running stream. Wickiups, domed shelters of willow and grass, were scattered among the trees. Smoke rose from dozens of cooking fires. Children and dogs ran, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. It was, for a moment, beautiful. But as they descended, the laughter died. People emerged from their wickiups and from the shade of the cottonwoods. Their faces were not welcoming. They were gaunt, their eyes filled with suspicion and a deep, weary sadness. This was a people under siege. Kyle rode into the center of the camp and dismounted, pulling Victoria from her pony. He shoved her into the open, and a low, angry murmur rippled through the crowd. Cale! A woman, sharp-featured and beautiful in a way that was almost painful, pushed through the crowd. She was dressed in a finely beaded deerskin dress. Her eyes were fixed on Victoria with a venom that was palpable. What is this? You leave to hunt Slocum, to avenge Taza, and you bring back this? She spat on the ground at Victoria's feet. A white-eyes pesticant? She is payment, Tala, Kyle said, his voice flat. Payment? Tala laughed, a sound like scraping stones. Or a pet? Does she replace the one your foolish brother took? A dangerous, deadly silence fell. Cale's hand shot out and gripped Tala's wrist. Do not speak of my brother, he warned. I will speak. She wrenched her arm free, her eyes blazing. He brought a white woman here, and she brought the bluecoats. Now you bring another. Are you a fool, Cale? Or just blind? She is the daughter of Silas Hayes, Cale announced to the crowd, and the name hit them like a physical blow. The murmurs turned to growls. She is the snake's blood, and she will stay here until the snake pays what he owes. An old man, his face a web of deep wrinkles and his hair a brilliant white, stepped from the largest wickiup. He leaned on a staff, but his back was straight. This was Dakota, the chief, Cale's father. He looked at Victoria, his gaze passing over her torn dress and her terrified, sun-blistered face. Then he looked at his son. You have brought the gone, the sickness, into our home, Dakota said, his voice a low rumble. This is not our way. We do not steal women. I did not steal her, father, Cale said, a rare note of defense in his voice. I took her as collateral. Her father is the one who betrayed us to Slocum. Her father is the reason Taza is dead. At the mention of Taza, an old woman at the back of the crowd let out a high, keening wail of grief. It was a sound that went straight through Victoria, lodging in her heart like a sliver of ice. And what will you do with her? Dakota asked, his voice heavy. Her father is a coward. He has already forgotten her. She is useless to us. She is not useless, Tala sneered, her gaze raking over Victoria. She has hands. She can work. Let her work for Nolan. Let her gut the fish and scrape the hides. Let her see the hands of the women her father made widows. Dakota considered this, his dark eyes fixed on Victoria. He saw her fear, but he also saw the unyielding pride in her posture. Nolan, he called. The old woman who had wailed, Taza's mother, Cale's mother, stepped forward. Her face was a mask of sorrow so profound it seemed carved from rock. She looked at Victoria, the daughter of the man who had effectively murdered her son. Victoria braced herself for a slap, a curse. Instead, Nolan simply looked at her, her eyes so full of pain that Victoria had to look away. Nolan spoke, her voice soft and cracked. She is soft. Her hands are like a baby's. She will be dead in a week. Then she will die, Cale said, turning away. It is no matter. He strode off toward the stream, leaving Victoria alone in a circle of hostile faces. Nolan grabbed Victoria's arm, her fingers surprisingly strong, like bird talons. She dragged her toward a wickiup set, apart from the others. You will work, Nolan said, her English as broken as her heart. You will not speak. You will grind corn. You will carry water. You are not need. You are not even a dog. You are nothing. You are the shadow of a traitor. Nolan shoved her to the ground, near a large flat stone and a basket of hard, dried corn. Grind, she commanded. Victoria looked at the stone, then at her hands, which were soft only by comparison to the women here. They were blistered and raw. She was a hostage, a payment, and she had just been assigned to the lowest, most back-breaking labor in the camp, under the watchful, grieving eye of the woman who hated her most. She picked up the handstone. It was heavy, unforgiving. As she began to grind, the repetitive scraping motion was a rhythm. With every pass, she ground the corn, and with every pass, she felt her old life, her education, her manners, her identity as Victoria Hayes, being ground into dust. The days bled into weeks. Victoria's life became a cycle of brutal, mind-numbing labor. She woke before the sun, her body screaming, to haul heavy, wet hides from the stream. She spent hours on her knees, the grinding stone in her hand, until her palms were calloused, then raw, then calloused again. She learned the true meaning of exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that eclipsed her fear. Nalin was a silent taskmaster. She never spoke a cruel word, but her grief was a suffocating presence. She would watch Victoria work, her dark eyes vacant, sometimes weeping silently as she wove baskets. Tala, however, was vocal in her cruelty. She was Taza's widow, and she made sure Victoria felt the full weight of that. "The white eyes is slow," Tala would call out to the other women. "Be careful, she might break a nail. Her father's blood is thin, like water." The other women, whose husbands and sons had also died in Slocum's ambush, would glare at Victoria, and she would just lower her head, her face hot with shame, and grind the corn faster. Cale was a ghost. She saw him only at a distance. He was the tribe's lead warrior now, constantly organizing patrols, hunting parties, and scouts. He seemed to carry the weight of his people's survival on his shoulders, and he never once looked in her direction. She was, as Nalin had said, nothing. But Victoria was not soft. She was not her father. One evening, as she was trying to mend the same torn calico dress she had worn for a month, she broke down. The needle she had was crude, the thread was sinew, and her fingers were stiff. She looked at the torn, valuable deerskin of a water bag, lying discarded by Nalin's wickiup. It had a long tear, deemed unrepairable. She picked it up. She remembered her mother, years ago in Boston, teaching her fine needlepoint. "A lady's only true skill," her mother had joked. Victoria's hands, now strong and rough, found a new rhythm. With a bone awl and a strand of sinew, she began to stitch the thick hide. Her stitches were tiny, precise, and crossed over each other in a way that pulled the leather tight, creating a waterproof seal. It took hours. When she was done, she wordlessly filled the mended bag with water. It held. She placed it at the entrance to Nalin's wickiup. When Nalin emerged, she saw the bag. She picked it up. She examined the fine, perfect stitching. She looked at Victoria, her face unreadable, and then, for the first time, she grunted. It was not kindness, but it was not hatred. It was acknowledgement. That night, Nalin threw a second, worn blanket at Victoria's feet. A week later, the twist came. Victoria was dumping ashes from the cooking fire down by the stream, the one place she could be alone. The sun was setting, painting the canyon in hues of blood and fire. She heard voices, low and angry, from behind a curtain of willows. She froze. It was Tala, and a man. "Slocum does not wait, Tala." The man, a warrior named Chaco, hissed. "He paid you, and you did nothing." Victoria's blood ran cold. "Paid you?" Tala's voice was a venomous whisper. "I did what I said. I gave him Taza's patrol path. It was not my fault Cale was not with him. Taza was a fool, always trying to prove himself. He was supposed to be the one to see the white woman first, the one to make a mistake." Chaco scoffed. "And now, this new white woman is here, and Cale watches her." "He does not," Tala snapped, "and he will be mine. Slocum's men will push, Cale will fight, and he will be the great hero his father cannot be. He will need me. Now be silent. Your payment is buried." Victoria's heart was a hammer against her ribs. She backed away, step by silent step, the ashes forgotten. The betrayal. It wasn't just Silas. Silas had sold the faulty guns and the general location of the tribe. But someone inside the camp had told Bartholomew Slocum the exact patrol route. It was Tala, Taza's own widow. Victoria leaned against a rock, her stomach heaving. Tala hadn't just been grieving. She had been acting. She had orchestrated her own husband's death, hoping, perhaps, that Kale would be caught in the same trap, or that Taza's death would clear a path for her to Kale's side. Victoria now held a secret that was heavier and more dangerous than any grinding stone. She, the white slave, was the only one who knew the truth. And in this camp, that truth was a death sentence. Victoria's world was now sharp and terrifying. Every glance from Tala felt like a threat. Every time Chaco passed, his eyes averted, Victoria felt her skin crawl. She had a terrible dilemma. Who could she tell? Kale? He was consumed by his duties, and he was the object of Tala's obsession. He would see her as a lying white woman, trying to sow discord. Dakota? The chief was a man of law, but she was a doya, a slave. Her word against the grieving widow of his son? She would be laughed at, then punished. She could only think of one person who hated Tala with a quiet, simmering intensity. A person who was lost in a fog of grief, but who was, above all, a mother. Victoria waited. She waited for 2 days, her nerves shredding, until Nalin was alone, sitting outside her wickiup, weaving a mourning basket, her hands moving, but her eyes far away. Victoria approached, her heart pounding. She knelt in the dust at Nalin's feet. "Nalin," she whispered. The old woman didn't look up. Victoria, her hands shaking, took a stick. She drew in the dirt. She drew a crude map of the canyon. She drew the patrol path Taza had taken. Then she drew a group of stick figures with hats, Slocum's men, ambushing them. Nalin's hands stilled on her basket. Victoria then drew a wickiup and a line connecting the wickiup to Slocum's men. She drew a small pouch, like a bag of coins. Nalin stared at the drawing. Her eyes, for the first time in weeks, were not vacant. They were sharp, intelligent, and filling with a dreadful understanding. "Who?" Nalin whispered, her voice a dry rasp. Victoria looked at Tala's wickiup across the camp. She didn't have to say the name. Nalin's face contorted. It was a mask of disbelief, then horror, then a terrible rising rage that was colder than any fire. She had always been suspicious of Tala's overly dramatic grief, a grief that seemed to have no quiet moments, only public wails. She had known her son Taza had been infatuated with Tala, but that Tala had only ever had eyes for Kale. Nalin grabbed Victoria's arm, her fingers digging in like talons. "You lie. You die," she hissed. "I heard her," Victoria said, her voice shaking but firm. "With Chaco, by the stream. She said, I gave him Taza's path. Chaco took Slocum's payment for her." Nalin let go. She stared at the drawing. She had her answer. She rose to her feet, her back straighter than Victoria had ever seen it. She was no longer just a grieving mother. She was the wife of the chief. Before she could act, a cry went up from the canyon lookout. A warrior, one of Kale's scouts, stumbled into the camp, an arrow shaft broken off in his shoulder. He collapsed at Kale's feet. "Slocum," the warrior panted, blood on his lips. "He is not gone. He is at the lower pass. He brings heavy wagons, a gun, on wheels." A ripple of panic went through the camp. Kale helped the man. "A cannon?" "No," the scout groaned. "A Indalka gun, one that spins. It shoots forever. A Gatling gun." Victoria had read about them. A single gun that could mow down 100 men in a minute. Slocum wasn't just mining. He was establishing a permanent camp. He was damming their lower water source. This was an act of war, of extermination. Kale's face became a mask of stone. He drew his knife. "Warriors," he bellowed. "We ride. We will not wait for them to bring that gun to our homes. We will wipe Slocum and his poison from our mountain tonight." A roar went up. The warriors ran for their weapons. Nalin watched, her face grim. She knew this was exactly what Tala wanted, a head-on suicidal war that would get Kale killed, or make him a hero she could claim. She locked eyes with Victoria. The time for whispering was over. No. Nalin's voice cut through the war cries. Every warrior, including Kale, froze. Nalin never raised her voice. She walked, with the terrible, slow dignity of her grief, into the center of the camp. She went straight to Dakota, her husband, who sat by his chief's fire. "My husband," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Our son, Kale, goes to his death, and he is being sent by the same person who murdered our son, Taza." The camp fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Kale looked at his mother as if she had gone mad. Tala, standing with the other women, laughed. "The old woman's grief has addled her. Kyle, go. Avenge us." "The one who murdered Taza," Nalin continued, ignoring Tala, "is his own wife." She pointed a withered finger straight at Tala. "She is the snake. She sold Taza's patrol path to Slocum. She took Slocum's silver, delivered by Chaco." Tala's face went white. Chaco, who had been grabbing his rifle, froze. "This is a lie," Tala shrieked. "A lie put in her head by the white slave. She has bewitched Nalin." Kale looked from his mother, to Tala, to Victoria, who stood, terrified, by the ashes. "Mother," he said, his voice pleading, "this is not the time." "It is exactly the time," Nalin roared. "You go to fight a man who knows you are coming, because the same snake is in our camp. Ask her, Kale. Ask her why Chaco buried a bag of silver ore by the red rocks." All eyes turned to Chaco. The warrior was sweating, his eyes darting. He saw Kale's gaze land on him, and it was not the gaze of a friend. It was the gaze of an executioner. Chaco's nerve broke. He dropped his rifle and sprinted for the tree line. Kale was faster. He moved like a shadow. He didn't use a rifle. He threw his knife. It spun, end over end, and buried itself to the hilt in Chaco's back. The warrior fell, face first, into the dust. Tala screamed. It was not a scream of grief. It was a scream of a cornered animal. The internal, poisonous drama was laid bare. But at that exact moment, the lookout cried again. "Riders! Slocum's men! They are at the lower pass. They are setting up the gun." The crisis was immediate. The tribe was in immediate danger. And now it was fractured, its leadership in question, its heart poisoned by betrayal. Kale's original plan, a direct, honorable assault, was suicide against a Gatling gun. They were trapped. "We are lost," Dakota said, his voice heavy. "No." The voice was small, but it cut through the despair. It was Victoria. Kyle turned, his face a mask of fury and confusion. "You," he growled. "You can't fight the gun," Victoria said, stepping forward, her fear making her bold. "Bartholomew Slocum. He's not a soldier. I know his kind. I've read his ledgers at my father's post. He's a businessman. He's arrogant. He's guarding his equipment, not the mountain." She grabbed the stick from Nalin and drew in the dirt. "His camp. He will have all his supplies with him. He uses black powder. For blasting. He'll have crates of it." Kale stared at the drawing. "A fire? More than a fire," Victoria said, her mind racing, remembering the invoices. He ordered dynamite for the mine, crates of it, and blasting caps. If you can get them together." A new, desperate plan formed. A small team, not a war party, a sabotage team. Sneak into Slocum's camp, not to fight, but to destroy their powder supply. It would create a massive explosion, destroy the heavy gun, and scatter them in chaos. I will lead it, Kale said. You can't, Victoria said. You can't read. He stared at her. What? The crates, she said, her voice shaking. They will be marked. Dynamite, powder, blasting caps. They're all in Inda Elki writing. You need me. I can make sure you light the right fuse. Kyle looked at his father. He looked at Tala, who was now being held by two warriors, her face a mask of murderous hatred. And he looked at Victoria, the white eyes, the payment, who was offering him the only path that wasn't death. She comes, Kale said to his father. He then looked at the two warriors guarding Tala. And she comes too. Her hands will be tied. She will walk in front of me. She will see, firsthand, the destruction she brought. And if Slocum's men shoot, she will be the first to die. The night was moonless, a thick black velvet that was both a blessing and a shroud. Kale led a small, grim party of 5. There was himself, Victoria, and 2 of his most trusted warriors, Hota and Loken, men who moved with the fluid silence of hunting cats. Behind them, bound at the wrists and tethered to a stoic warrior named Garen, was Tala. She was their shield, their prisoner, and a living, walking symbol of the tribe's poisoned heart. She stumbled in the dark, her pride replaced by a venomous, simmering silence. Victoria's heart was a hammer against her ribs, but it was not the fluttering pulse of a cornered animal. This was different. It was the steady, thudding beat of resolve. Her hands, calloused and strong, were not tied. She was no longer cargo. She was a weapon. She, the white woman who had been brought here as payment, was now the key to the tribe's survival, and the absurdity of it was not lost on her. Kale was a shadow at her side, his presence a physical weight. She could feel the heat radiating from him, an aura of focused, controlled rage. He had not spoken a word to her since the plan was formed, but he didn't need to. In the darkness, he put a hand on her shoulder, not a grip of possession, but a simple, guiding pressure. This way. Be silent. As they neared the canyon pass, the sounds of Slocum's camp drifted up to them. The ragged, drunken singing of buffalo gals, the braying of mules, and the loud, booming laugh of Bartholomew Slocum himself. He is arrogant, Kale breathed, his voice a wisp of sound by her ear. He thinks we are trapped. He is a businessman, Victoria whispered back, her voice firm. He's loud because he thinks he's already won. He's counting his money. Kyle grunted. He motioned to Garen and Tala. You wait here, he commanded in Apache. If the shooting starts, she is your first target. Let the Inda Elki find her body. Tala let out a low hiss, but Garen's knife pricked her back, and she was silent. Kale looked at Victoria. You read. I kill. We move. Do not think. Do not feel. Just do. She nodded. They moved. Kale, Loken, and Hota fanned out, 3 points of a lethal spear, with Victoria in the protected center. They slipped past the first sentry, a man whistling as he stared up at the stars, oblivious to the death that passed him by. They encountered a second, near the wagons. He was relieving himself against a wheel, humming. Before Victoria could even register him as a threat, Hota was on him. There was a sound like a wet cough, a brief shuffling dance, and the man was lowered to the ground, his eyes wide and vacant. Kyle and Loken were already moving past, not even looking back. Victoria stopped, her stomach lurching. The finality of it, the speed. Victoria! Kale's voice was sharp, a command. She swallowed her fear and ran to catch up. The supply tent was exactly where she had predicted, the largest one, set near the wagons and the devastating canvas-shrouded bulk of the Gatling gun. Cale sliced the tent flap open with his knife. They were in. The tent stank of canvas, bacon grease, sulfur, and something sharp. Black powder, Victoria whispered, her eyes adjusting. Crates were stacked high. She ran her hands along the rough-hewn wood, her fingers tracing the stenciled letters. Flour, beans, ammunition, U.S. Army. He's stealing from the forts, too, she murmured. Faster, Dota, he. Cale hissed from the flap, a shadow among shadows. Here. She found it. A line of kegs. DuPont black powder. And here. Her hands found a different crate, the lettering stark. Dynamite. Dangerous. Good, Cale said. Loken, Hota, the powder. Make the trail. The two warriors moved with terrifying efficiency, slitting the kegs, spilling a thick, black line of powder that snaked out of the tent. But Victoria's mind was racing. Cale, wait. The powder trail. It's too slow. It will just burn. They could put it out. It might not be enough to destroy the gun. What? He growled. The dynamite, she said, her voice shaking with the sudden terrible clarity of her idea. It explodes. It shatters. We don't need a fire. We need a shock wave. We need to set the dynamite. This is not our way, Hota whispered, his knife in his hand. This is a white man's trap. She is right, Cale said, his voice flat. He had seen what blasting powder could do to a mountain. How? Victoria's hands were frantic. We need the caps. A small box. Metal or wood. She found it. Blasting caps. Here. I need a fuse. And a match. Cale! A shout from outside. A drunken miner, stumbling from the campfire, had seen Loken's shadow. Hey! What the hell are you? Loken's knife ended the question, but the shout was out. The camp's drunken songs turned to cries of alarm. Alarm! Indians! Indians in the camp! Light it! Cale roared to his men. No, wait! Victoria screamed, fumbling with a stick of dynamite, jamming a cap into its waxy surface. The fuse! I have to! The tent flap was ripped open. It was Bartholomew Slocum himself, a portly man in a silk vest, his face red with drink and fury. He held a repeater rifle. Well, well, he sneered, his eyes finding Victoria in the gloom. What a dynamic development. Miss Hayes, I presume? Rifle shots began to punch through the tent. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Your father sold you for silver ore, did he? Slocum laughed, leveling the rifle. I offered him twice that. Business, you see. Now I'll take my property back and this savage's scalp. He was mine. Cale didn't fire. He launched himself, not at Slocum, but at the wall of the tent, slashing a new exit with his long knife. Hota Loken, the trail, light it and run. The two warriors, having finished their work, lit the powder line. It sparked, hissed, and raced away like a fiery snake. Victoria, the fuse, Cale bellowed, grabbing her arm. He's mine, Slocum roared, firing his rifle. The bullet sang past Cale's head. Victoria's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the match. A lady's only true skill. Her mother's voice. She struck the match. It flared. She touched it to the green fuse. It sputtered, sparked, and caught. Run! Kyle grabbed her and threw her through the slit he'd cut in the canvas. They tumbled out, Slocum firing wildly behind them. Chaos erupted. Miners were running, some without weapons. Cale's two warriors were already gone, vanishing into the night. Tala! A scream. Victoria looked back. Garin, the warrior guarding Tala, was fighting off two miners. In the confusion, Tala had broken free. She had Garin's knife. But she wasn't running from the camp. She was running toward them, her hair unbound, her face a mask of insane rage. "Cale!" she shrieked, her voice high and piercing. Cale, fending off a miner with his knife, turned at the sound of his name. Tala was running straight for him, the knife raised. "If I can't have you," she screamed, her eyes blazing with a suicidal, possessive fire, "no one will." She was 10 feet from him. He would not turn in time. "No!" Victoria screamed, picking up a rock, a useless gesture. A single, sharp shot cracked through the air. It was not a repeater. It was an old, heavy-caliber hunting rifle. Tala stopped. She looked down, a strange, confused look on her face, at the dark, blooming flower on her chest. She looked up at Cale, her mouth open, as if to say his name one last time. Then she crumpled to the dust. Victoria looked up at the ridge, where they had left the rear guard. She saw a figure silhouetted against the dim starlight. It was not Garen, it was Nalin. She stood tall, Dakota's rifle in her hands. She had followed them, not to watch, but to hunt. She had come to mete out the justice her husband and son could not. "Victoria!" Cale's voice snapped her back. He grabbed her. "The fuse!" They ran. They dove behind a massive granite boulder, Cale covering her body with his own, just as the world turned white. There was no sound. First, just a silent, blinding flash that erased the world. Then, a whump that seemed to suck the air from Victoria's lungs. And then the sound arrived. A physical, earth-shattering wall of noise that hit them, pounded them, and went on and on. The ground heaved as if a giant had punched it from below. The air was full of fire, shrapnel, and the screams of men. The Gatling gun was tossed 50 feet, a broken, mangled toy. Silence, absolute and deafening, followed. Victoria's ears rang. The air smelled of sulfur and burning meat. Cale pushed himself off her. He was covered in dust, a cut on his cheek. He was breathing hard. He looked at her, his black eyes wide in the sudden hellish light of the burning camp. He had 1,000 questions in those eyes, but he asked none of them. He just grabbed her arm. "Up! We are done here." The rout was absolute. The survivors, deafened and terrified, were fleeing down the mountain. They returned to the rancheria not as conquering heroes, but as weary survivors. The sun was just beginning to stain the eastern sky with shades of lavender and blood. Nalin was already there, sitting by Dakota's fire, her face carved from stone. She had wordlessly handed the rifle back to her husband. The tribe understood. The betrayal was purged. Weeks passed. The siege was broken. Slocum, it was said, was found by a cavalry patrol from Fort Bowie, wandering the desert, his hair white, muttering about dynamite ghosts. Victoria's life changed. She was no longer Nalin's slave. She was something else. The women, who had once scorned her, now brought her small gifts, a well-made awl, a strip of sweet jerky. Nalin, in silence, taught her how to find the water-bearing roots. It was a slow, quiet truce. Kyle avoided her. He was busy. He led patrols. He hunted. He rebuilt. But Victoria would catch him watching her, his expression grim and unreadable. One afternoon, the lookout cried, "Blue coats!" The camp tensed, but the soldiers, a small patrol, were not attacking. They were escorting a single, bedraggled man in a rumpled suit. Silas Hayes. Victoria's stomach went cold. Kyle appeared at her side, his hand resting on his knife. "Victoria," Silas cried, his voice breaking. He ran forward, his hands out. "My darling girl. Thank God. I've been so worried. I've moved heaven and earth. I told the cavalry everything. how Slocum was a monster, how he forced me to trade with him, and he took you. These good people. He gestured, sweating, to the stone-faced Apache. They saved you, didn't they? He grabbed her hands. We're ruined, my girl. Slocum, before he went mad, he told them lies about our business. But it's all right. We can go east. We can go back to Boston. We can start again. Victoria looked at her father's soft, pleading, weak hands. Then she looked at her own, calloused, scarred, and strong. She slowly, deliberately pulled her hands free. No, father. No? He stammered. Victoria, don't be foolish. We must leave this filth. He is not the savage, father. She finally looked at Cale, who was watching her, his face a mask. You are. You sold faulty guns. You sold me. You are a tisika. She used the Apache word. A snake. You are worthless. Silas stared, his face ashen. He had been judged. The young corporal, a man named John W. Fields, looked deeply embarrassed. Ma'am, we're here to escort you. I am not going, Victoria said, her voice clear. Victoria! Silas shrieked, his composure breaking. You can't. You're white. I am Victoria, she said. And she turned her back on him. A final, complete act. The soldiers led the sputtering, broken man away. The silence that remained was heavy. Kyle stood beside her. You shamed him, he said quietly. He shamed himself, Victoria replied. They stood for a long time, the camp watching. Finally, Cale looked at the mountains, not at her. The dead is gone. My brother is avenged. Slocum is gone. Tala is gone. He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw the man, not the warrior. His eyes were full of a deep, weary sadness. You are not da zisse, he said, his voice low. You are not payment. You are free. We can take you to Tucson. You can catch the stagecoach to the east. You can go home. Victoria looked at the dusty, barren plains of Tucson in her mind. She thought of the stifling parlors of Boston, the endless, meaningless ledgers, the world of whispers and lies. Then she looked up at the jagged, beautiful purple peaks of the Chiricahua Mountains. This was a hard land, a land of thorns and grief and stone, but it was not a land of lies. I am not Dotahi anymore, she said, testing the words. And I am not going to Boston. She met his gaze, and her own was just as strong. I think I am already home. Cale's heart, hardened by grief and frozen by the desire for revenge, felt a crack. It was not a taming. It was a healing. He did not smile. A smile was a frivolous thing, and he had forgotten how. But his eyes, for the first time, were not cold. They were clear. He just nodded, a single, sharp gesture of acceptance. The hunters are back, he said, his voice practical, normal, as if everything had just been settled. We must prepare the meat. He turned and began to walk toward the rancheria. He did not offer her his hand. She did not need him to. She fell into step beside him. He gave her the reins to her own horse. They rode, side by side, into the heart of the canyon, not as captive and warrior, but as two people who had seen the worst of the world and had chosen to build a new one. Victoria's debt was paid, but not with her life. It was paid with her courage. She traded her father's world of lies for a world of harsh truths and earned her place not as a prisoner, but as a protector. Cale didn't just save his tribe from Slocum. He saved it from the poison within, all because a woman he took as payment showed him the difference between vengeance and justice. The Chiricahua Mountains hold many secrets, but the greatest of them is that even in the most brutal land, respect, honor, and a love as tough as the landscape itself can find a way to grow. If you were moved by Victoria and Kale's story, please help our channel grow. Like this video, share it with someone who loves an epic drama, and subscribe for more stories of the Wild West every week.